What has happened, everybody? James Hancock here. Just caught the first episode of Cobra Kai, and much to my surprise and delight, I have to admit, the Karate Kid franchise is back, and that is something I never thought I was going to say. I saw the trailers a few weeks back and I kind of forgot about it, but last night just on a whim I decided to get a YouTube Red subscription. First month is free, and so I queued up Cobra Kai this morning, and I have to admit, I loved it. I was really entertained by it. And if you follow my channel, if you follow my podcast, you know that I occasionally rant and rave about how much I hate the overemphasis on 80s nostalgia and pop culture entertainment these days. I'm going to contradict myself because my nostalgia for the first Karate Kid from 1984, it's absolutely impossible for me to look at Cobra Kai in isolation from the 1984 film Karate Kid. I had just finished first grade when that movie came out. I was taken to see it with my family, and it was probably at that time the most heartwarming, euphoric, happy Hollywood ending I'd ever seen in a movie. To this day, if I watch the final scene, I will just start weeping. It is absolutely glorious stuff. I saw the sequel in the theater, saw the third one on TV, third one wasn't so good, and I kind of left the franchise alone after that. But I thought Karate Kid was over and done with. But here we are in 2018 with Cobra Kai. And while Daniel LaRusso is very much back, it is actually the character of Johnny who is the star of the show this time around. As a kid, I absolutely loathed and despised Johnny. He was kind of the ultimate 80s high school villain. I mean, whether you're watching comedies or action movies, whatever the case might be, there were certain stereotypes that most 80s high school villains embodied. Usually they were incredibly fit, they had blonde hair, they drove either motorcycles or fast cars, they had insanely hot girlfriends. They liked to be mean to the heroes of all these various stories. But part of the fun, dramatic hook of this show is that it actually makes us feel a little empathy to Johnny and see the tournament through his eyes in a slightly different light. And the show also acts as an interesting commentary on generational values because Johnny is very much locked in amber. He's still driving an old Pontiac Firebird. He's watching old 80s movies like Iron Eagle. His life is very much stuck in a rut. Bad diet, too much booze. Whereas Daniel LaRusso seems to have thrived. He's got a bunch of car dealerships around the valley in Burbank. He's kind of a public figure, at least in terms of his commercials, still cashing in on some of his brief celebrity as a karate star as a kid. And granted, I've only seen the first episode, so I have no idea where it's going to go. But so far, it seems as if this show is going to almost act as a commentary on millennials from the perspective of somebody who's knocking at the door of 50 or perhaps a little older than that. Johnny Lawrence is completely, totally unimpressed with the youth of today, and he mostly just wants to be left alone by them and just go about his day, working his dead-end job. But one night, a bunch of bullies are picking on a kid who recently moved into his apartment complex, and they happen to fall onto Johnny's car. That forces Johnny to get involved, and he ends up going to war with some very old-school karate against these bullies. It's almost the mirror image of the scene with Mr. Miyagi taking on Johnny and his friends when they're dressed up in those Halloween skeleton outfits. And the people who created the show, John Hurwitz, Hayden Schlossberg, and Josh Heald, if I'm saying their names correctly, very clearly love the 80s unrepentantly because we get this great bit where Johnny's at home watching Iron Eagle, listening to Lou Gossett Jr.'s very inspiring words. This is another movie I caught in the theater as a kid. And he literally goes for like a 1980s style drunken montage drive, much like we see in Rocky IV when Rocky's upset about Apollo being killed. And we get all these great flashbacks from the first Karate Kid. But then he arrives at the building where the tournament took place, and we even get a little flashback from Karate Kid 2 in the opening, where Johnny's sensei was choking him out of frustration over Johnny's performance in the tournament. But what really sets this series in motion is a bunch of girls who are texting on their phones. They crash into Johnny's car, and it gets totaled. The car gets towed away, but much to his chagrin, when he goes to pick it up, it's actually at one of the LaRusso car dealerships. And what's great is seeing a former bully more than 30 years later now trying to hide his identity because he's got his shades on, he's got a hood on, he's doing everything in his power to avoid bumping into LaRusso. He just wants to have his car taken to another dealership. He wants nothing to do with LaRusso. He's obviously very embarrassed to be there. But what really gives Johnny a kick in the ass is when he sees that it was actually LaRusso's daughter who was in the car that smashed into him. He doesn't bring that up. And when inevitably he bumps into LaRusso, LaRusso's a little bit cocky and a little bit douchey. I mean, obviously, at this point, he's very proud of his accomplishments. And he's kind of making fun of Johnny at his expense in front of his coworkers. And what's interesting is Johnny calls out LaRusso in something that never occurred to me, but by strict point fighting in karate, technically, LaRusso won by an illegal kick. LaRusso counters that Johnny also had a few illegal shots in that match, but you can tell it's still eating at Johnny the fact that Johnny got a warning, LaRusso got the win. And you can also tell that it's still eating him alive that LaRusso kinda sorta stole his girl. And it's probably unkind of me to call LaRusso a little bit of a douche because he is actually a genuinely nice guy. He basically says that he's gonna do all the repairs on Johnny's car for free, that the repairs would cost more than the car is worth, but it actually would be good fun for his employees to practice restoring a Pontiac Firebird. But then LaRusso says something that forces the Cobra to rise again in Johnny, where he says, look, it wasn't your fault, it was Cobra Kai. Clearly Johnny does not see things the same way, and so what does he do? He cashes a check from his stepfather and he opens up a new dojo for Cobra Kai, and his very first recruit is the kid who's being bullied. And we get this great little scene at the end of the episode. He's essentially underlining the key ingredients to the Cobra Kai philosophy to karate. It's basically everything that's the total polar opposite of what most millennials have been taught. Johnny is very clearly embracing the idea of being an anti-hero, and I think that's actually very refreshing. As I'm often fond of saying, every villain is the hero of their own story. And at this point, Johnny's got 30 years of resentment built up in him, and he's obviously ready to reclaim control over his own life. I have no idea if this series will sustain the quality of the first episode. All I have to say is it's a damn good pilot. I was very entertained. I'm definitely going to watch a few more episodes. Whether or not I'll do reviews of each and every episode, I don't know, but maybe I'll do a season 1 overview if I end up really enjoying it. So if you're curious, you have absolutely nothing to lose because, like I said, you can get your first month free at YouTube Red. Then you immediately can binge the entire first season if you choose to. And if you haven't seen the original Karate Kid, shame on you. Watch the original Karate Kid. It was a landmark of 80s pop culture entertainment that probably did more to open more karate schools across the country than any other movie in history. I'm a massive fan of MMA, and while karate is only one component of mixed martial arts today, you see it being employed very effectively by people like Lyoto Machida or Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. If a kid were to come to me today and ask what martial arts should they study, I would say just study all of them. But for the purposes of a drama, very nostalgic drama, look back at the 80s, I'll put my interest in MMA aside for the time being and just embrace some old school karate. So I hope you enjoyed my recap and review. Please consider giving my channel a subscribe. If you want to hunt me down, you can give me a shout on Twitter at Colbrax. And I'll be back at y'all later this evening to review the latest episode of The Expanse, Onwards and Upwards.